Hey folks, welcome to Dice Chatter. Today we are going to talk about why I play Warcry and why I think you should too. So when I was a young lad, I played what you would call a gateway game into the wargaming hobby. And the game was called Mage Knights. You would collect and assemble a force of creatures, humanoids, elemental beings, or the undead to fight against a friend. You learned how to put together these warbands you have created to a certain number of points that you and your opponent would agree on, and you would take these individual fighters, anywhere from 10 to 20 or so models, and put them to the test in scenarios that were provided in the game. And now, unlike Warcry, customization was limited, the models were pre-painted and assembled, and there was no terrain provided. You would have to figure out how to buy or create some yourself. But this was no fault of the game. This was a time when wargaming was not as prominent in our nerd culture. At the end of the day, Mage Knights was easy to learn, fun to play, and really enjoyable to open up that next booster box to see what models you received to add to your army. Now, time and time again, I fondly remember the Mage Knight games my brother and a few of our friends played. If I remember right, I think I even used one of those free website templates and kept track of our game records and some new scenarios we came up with online. Those were the early days of my wargaming hobby, and we eventually stopped playing, which is when I took a break from wargaming for a long while. So relatively recently, Games Workshop released Warcry, a skirmish miniature game that has some relation to their massive fantasy army game, Age of Sigmar. And after playing a number of games of Warcry, it has really been a blast. I'm not the most competitive player in the world. I tend to joke around at the table and just enjoy the models, scenery, and time playing a good game. And it was then I realized Warcry has snuck some nostalgia for me. It reminds me of this Mage Knights game I have been blabbering about for the past few minutes. The simplicity of Warcry, the low model count, setting up terrain in interesting ways, and creating fun, engaging scenarios has been right up my alley. The games are quick, and every time I finish a game, I've wanted to flip some of those more battle plan cards to start up the next one. So if you are like me, this game may be perfect for you. Keep in mind, just like all of Games Workshop's games, there is some assembly and painting you may need to complete before you start playing. You can't just go buy a booster box with some already painted and assembled models. But as more of a hobbyist, this works out perfect for me. At this point in my rambling, you may have been wondering, is Warcry right for me? So we know Warcry is a quick game to learn. You don't need more than 15 models in a warband, and you are going to have to do some hobby work before you start playing the game. Now, for some of you, this may be a turn-off right away, so take this into account, of course. For the rest of this video, I will go into some key components that I believe may make or break the game for those of you that have an interest. First off, let's talk about the models. The models themselves look great. The plastic is great quality, and the effort you need to spend in removing mold lines and snipping them out of sprues, and overall cleanup time prior to painting is minimal compared to other Games Workshop products. The detail is on point, and they really fit the theme of Warcry. Now, this is all great, but the biggest flaw of all this is the lack of customization. Because these molds go together so well, it may be difficult for those of you who like to do modifications. This is something to keep in mind. Other than this, these are some great plastic models. Now, let's hop over to the meat and potatoes of Warcry, and that would be the rules. In the core book, the rules section is give or take 17 pages with lots of fluff and images taking up this section. The rules themselves will probably take a couple games for a seasoned wargaming veteran to get a handle on, but for a novice like myself, it maybe took 4 games. The rules are simple, which for some of you may be a big disappointment. Simplicity in games isn't always a good thing. You can lose out on strategy, experimentation, and the big one being enjoyment. Learning the rules for a game, whether complicated or not, isn't the issue I'm talking about here. The real issue is substance. With simpler rules, you tend to lack detail in your games, and after playing them a number of times, they just become a game of trouble or sorry. It's the same thing over and over again, and you just move your pawn when you are told to. But this is where I feel these special battle plan cards come in. They take a game that is lacking in substance compared to other war games and create an endless supply of variety. There is really something to flipping these cards and waiting to see what kind of game you are going to have that is super exciting. It sounds weird, but I could flip these cards all day just seeing the fun combinations I could have. It adds a new level of detail to an otherwise uncomplicated skirmish game. Now keep in mind this is an opinion piece. It may be no surprise to you, but I really enjoy this game and I see myself collecting, assembling, and playing this one for a long time. That is where it is up to you to decide. Maybe do a little bit of research. See if you can go in on a starter set with a friend, or take the knowledge I spewed out today and make your final decision. You know what kind of games you like. Not I or anyone else on the internet can convince you otherwise. I want to thank you all for watching, and of course, happy gaming.